So I'm Shauna Harper of Pivot Magazine, and I'm excited to welcome you to Pivot Magazine's podcast show, where we love to share the stories of Canadian entrepreneurs at different stages of their business. So this month, our city is Winnipeg, and with us we have the founder of Ramp Up Manitoba, which is also known as Startup Winnipeg, Chris Johnson. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Shauna. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. So what we do on these calls is to really find out a little bit about the different communities across Canada so that each of us can learn. I know for me, leading Startup PG, I'm always curious, and you've been so generous with sharing kind of what works in Winnipeg with us that I'd love to be able to share it with our listeners. So why don't we start off with you just kind of telling us how you guys got started with Ramp Up Manitoba and maybe clarify a little bit on why it's not Startup Winnipeg and it's Ramp Up Manitoba.
Yeah, fair. That's actually a good place to start. So we in Winnipeg about 3 years ago, this AscentWorks thing, which we'll talk about a little later, our rapid prototyping space got off the ground, and I went out there on the grand opening day. Started showing up every week and tried to figure out a way that I could get involved as a guy who doesn't know how to run a CNC machine. Mm-hmm. So right around that same time, not very long after, the Startup Canada train rolled through Winnipeg. And at that exact same time, there was a small group of us who were looking to try and build some sort of something, a community effectively, to connect each other, our ideas, talent, capabilities. Effectively at the simplest level, entrepreneur guy wants to meet someone who's got a cool idea.
Yeah.
And you know what? The Startup Canada train that rolled across the country really is we actually were one of the groups at that town hall, and we decided that we're going to start a community here. And it was, before we really knew all about that stuff, and we started it. We called it Ramp Up Manitoba, got off the ground, and then, whatever it was, 6 to 12 months later, Startup Communities came out, and we kind of already had this Ramp Up Manitoba train rolling. So we now have this terribly awkward branding nightmare. So Startup Winnipeg is Ramp Up Manitoba and vice versa, and the Startup Winnipeg website points to Ramp Up Manitoba. So, hey, we're just trying to accomplish the exact same things, and we frankly don't really care what it's called.
What it's called, exactly. Well, it's kind of serendipitous the way they kind of rolled in around the same time you guys were collecting together, trying to figure out how to create the community. So it's obviously in the air.
So. I'd say there was a gentle smoke, lifting off the fire when you're trying to get it going, and the Startup Canada train rolling through kind of was that spark to put it all together. So
yeah, well, I believe there's no accidents, so it obviously was meant to happen. So can you describe, I guess, for those listeners, kind of a little bit more about Winnipeg in the sense of kind of the city and the climate of the business community?
Right. Well, beyond being probably the greatest place to live on the planet, second, of course, only to Prince George.
Of course.
Yeah, you know what? Winnipeg's a great place. We're just under 1 million people, so it's large enough where you have everything you need, but it's also a good size where you tend to, you have a chance at least getting to know the people in the community, the business community, the supporting communities, etc. It's a good work-life balance here. There's lots of lake country and cottage country an hour from the city. So it's a wonderful place to be. And from a business standpoint, we have a really nice mix of stuff here. I mean, we're geographically located right in the middle of, the continent, effectively, right in the middle of Canada geographically, certainly. So a lot of what happens in Winnipeg is logistics-focused. We do still have some industrial. We have plenty of commercial. We have a good handful of corporate head offices, but certainly on the corporate head office side, a lot less so than you would find in Toronto and Vancouver, et cetera, and Calgary. But so what you do see is a lot more business-to-business type focus here, which I think is actually represented if you looked at the types of startups that we have here. I think that kind of helps shape what people see in terms of opportunities. So there you go.
If we can move to your community, I know you guys were talking about, a couple guys getting together and creating this, but how did you actually rally up, I guess, the entrepreneurial community? I mean, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are passionate across the country that want to know they're really passionate, but how do they get everybody else on board? Like, what did you guys do you think that really worked?
Well, yeah, that's something that we certainly spend a lot of time reflecting on. I think part of the answer really lies in the community leadership. And one of the things that I know to be the case here in Winnipeg, especially, is the folks who kind of first founded and assembled the community, or at least not assembled, but took the leading charge. We have a really diverse set of backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like everybody's a 20-something web technology startup guy.
Yeah.
So we have guys who do enterprise level stuff. We have specialists in the fabrication side. We have entrepreneur people. So it's like we have a nice background, and what that allows us to do, and what got us wound up so quickly was, when you're building a community for entrepreneurship, you still very much need to tap into all of the other communities that exist. So the design community, the prototyping, product design community, the student populations, the guys who've been working at a company for 30 years and have a great idea and they just don't know what to do with it. So by having a bunch of varied backgrounds, it really helped us, build a base quickly. But, if you look all the way back to the beginning, it's very, very humble beginnings. It was, hey, let's get together and meet up. And the first time we did that, there was maybe 8 of us, and then there was 60, and then there was 100. And, it sort of snowballed. And what we're learning is you do see new faces out every time. Sometimes, people who've been coming out drop off, but that's to be expected, right? Not everybody ends up, part of what we're doing is people learn where do they fit. They get visibility to what it's actually going to be like if they were to go out and start something and scale. And it's good. The community self-grooms from there forward.
So can you go over maybe the importance of mentors or role models? I know that we met Michael Aguirre at a startup down the hill. How have mentors and role models been important in growing your community?
Right. Well, to look at the point we were just talking about a few minutes ago about having how beneficial it is having a group of founders and entrepreneurs bought into the community building process early. Having mentors is an important piece of that. So a guy like Mike and other folks who've had exits in the past, and folks who this isn't their first rodeo, it helps to illuminate the story for those who are coming up behind them. So building a community can certainly be done by anybody, I would argue, but to really have it be effective and build a great base of support, it helps to have the folks who are turning around and helping to support people through the process that they themselves have already kind of fought through. Mm-hmm. So guys like Mike, perfect example. Kerry Stevenson is another awesome example. He's one of the co-founders of AscentWorks, and he's a former chief technology officer. He's a current participant in one of Winnipeg's probably most promising startups, and the guy's hands-on helping to build the community. So role model is important because it just you can be inspired by somebody else's example.
And do they help to get the word out about the events? Like how do you guys kind of, I know you've actually built and scaled really quickly from a few people to now a couple hundred people.
Right.
How do you guys get the word out about your events and things like that?
Well, just probably the same guerrilla tactics that everybody else uses. Yeah. We use Meetup.com as our Meetup hub. One of the reasons for that is it gives us an easy way to collect RSVPs for events. It helps to auto-remind people as the event comes up. It suggests it to other people based on their interests and other activities. So, on the Meetup, we have, I think between AscentWorks and RampUp, we're probably over 500 people on in terms of access to our Meetup events now, which is great. And listen, going back to the building a base of community, we have folks like the CYBFs, we have folks like RBC, we have all these other partners who have, because we're a private sector supported entity, we have a number of stakeholders who have, a vested interest in the community's growth and survival and flourishing growth. So, the word gets out, Twitter, Facebook, all those regular means, and also people like CYBF pumping it out to their databases of entrepreneurs and so on.
Perfect. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. You were saying you're supported by private sector. You guys are a nonprofit. So are you funded then by private sector? Is that how you get your funding?
Yeah. So we are a not-profit entity. We are an incorporated not-for-profit with a full charter and all the rest of it, members and a board. The board and governance model is set up such that the private sector supporters who came in early and really helped to give us the boost to get off the ground are members of the board. We have a managing director team, and then we have a member council that looks after sort of day-to-day operations of the entity now at this point, which is fantastic. So where we get our funding primarily at the beginning for the first year and a half was exclusively private sector support. We have done a couple projects provincially and federally, but they are project-based opportunities. So it is, we're building a project to say, with this support, we will accomplish this goal. And always is the case, we go out and we leverage and fundraise privately as well. So we never do something, or haven't to this point anyways, that's, straight support from the government. We tend to leverage it privately as well. But from a day-to-day operations perspective, we're self-sufficient based on our member dues and, routine operations.
Oh, so you do have member dues then? And yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. And then so annually, do you need to go back to get funding every year from the private sector? Or is this something that you're able through the members dues now that you're set up and you've kind of got the ball rolling with your events and things like that? Is that able to sustain you, or are you still needing to go out to get funding every time?
Yeah, there's an important distinction between need to and we do.
Yeah.
So we from a operational perspective, our membership dues and all the rest of it carry the day-to-day expenses. But from a strategic standpoint, we want to add a new piece of machinery. We want to buy more desks or chairs for the startup space. We want to bring in a speaker for this thing. Those types of things we either put on and we private sector fundraise for things like sponsorship, or we can go back to the supporters that we have and say, listen, here's what we'd like to do. Here's our plan. Here's how much it's going to cost. And the nice thing about that is a private sector company can make a decision on these types of things, almost instantly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It is no, but, and here's what you got to do to get it to be a yes, or it's a yes. Mm-hmm. Where, is totally different from an operational perspective with government, where, now you're playing the political game and, they have, stakeholders, which is the rest of the population to worry about. Whereas private sector companies only have themselves to worry about because they get to make their own decisions. And so it is a strong preference to go that way. But like I said, when we've done the public sector projects, we always leverage with private sector support as well. And
so what are your kind of most popular events?
Well, the events that seem to go over really well are, our ramp-up weekends, which are effectively a startup weekend, which I'm sure most communities are familiar with. We also, what we've been doing a lot more of lately, because, when you build a community, one of the things that happens, and you don't even necessarily realize it when it's happening, but you're basically building this like gravity around your community, which means you can actually start to attract things to you. So what we've been doing, and it's actually been pretty cool to see, the individual startups in the community are now empowering themselves to go out and do this on behalf of the community. So, company ABC is going to do an investor pitch. They, we've done it a number of times now where instead of them just going and doing a pitch to them, they say, hey, listen, I'm part of this really vibrant community. There's a whole bunch of great startups. Would you, or maybe you and a couple other of your buddies, like to get together and we could put together, 10 to 12 pitches for you in one day, one session. And, it's to the benefit of the whole community, better chance of you finding something that'll be a fit. And so those types of events have been going over really well.
No kidding, because it's kind of organically popping up, and it benefits both the investor and the startups being able to get the opportunity.
Yeah, and you know what, I have to say that it's not like any of the founders are sheepish or would have a problem dropping a line to a certain level of investor. But when you can drop a line, it's sort of on behalf of the community, and it's here's this thing that I'm a part of, and we'd love to have you come out. We usually try and tie it in with an event where maybe they'll do like an investor session the night before that's publicly attended by anybody in the community, and then the following day is kind of a lined up day of pitches. So we're going to keep up with that format because it seems to be resonating really well.
Oh, fantastic! So I want to make sure we leave enough time for AscentWorks because I know that for us here in Prince George, when we were starting up our maker space, or we call it a maker lab, it's not quite a space yet, just a
Right.
very small section of the gallery. Our director of our art gallery ended up being in Winnipeg around the same time. I think we started the conversation, and he managed
That's
to
right.
go in there, and he came back, and his eyes were literally glazed over, and he's like, "You won't believe what I saw. It was just an incredible organization, and how you've mobilized it and everything." So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about AscentWorks and kind of how it got started and where it is now? I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, ScentWorks is a very cool story, and it's worthy of note again. ScentWorks and Ramp Up sort of started independent of each other, but within 6 months, it was like, wow, we really need to be a thing together because as a story and as a community, it just makes a lot of sense for us to be under one roof. So we're actually the same legal entity, same board, etc. But
Oh, okay.
all on the AscentWorks piece, all credit goes out to Mike Legary, Carrie Stevenson, and Dave Bernhardt, who were the three founders of the Makerspace side. So effectively, what happens if I oversimplify is, Mike Legary's, very very cool guy, very innovative guy, decides, hey, I'd really like to have a workspace here in Winnipeg that I can just go and tinker with stuff at. Was at a TEDx Manitoba talk, saw Carrie Stevenson talking about 3D printing, additive manufacturing. Turns out Carrie Stevenson writes a blog called Fabaloo, which is arguably one of the world's most widely read 3D and additive printing blogs. And so the two of them got together, and David joined in soon after, and they built the first version of AscentWorks, which was a dirty, dingy, hole in the wall.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, you do. And so, they slapped some equipment in there, and it was like, how can we just get enough members to break even on these costs, right? Most of the equipment was donated, etc. And then from there, it was just one foot in front of the other. But, Mike Legary was really the guy who, significantly stepped up to pull together the resources to make the thing happen. And, he's still an active part of everything that we do. But, yeah, very, very cool story. And AscentWorks is definitely part of the magic of the entrepreneurship community here, because now what we're seeing is, lots of communities have a startup co-working space. We have a startup co-working space literally 6 feet away from this unbelievable rapid prototyping facility with, multi-million dollars of state-of-the-art equipment. So imagine what happens when people who maybe showed up because they wanted to start a tech startup all of a sudden see somebody prototyping the next best thing since the, sliced bread. It's not that much of a leap to say, oh, I could put a package on that and sell 20,000 at Cabela's or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
So
so
it's very
the
exciting.
community itself is also interesting because is it still all volunteer run?
Yeah, that's another
That to
very,
me is
very
just
important
amazing.
piece. Yeah, well, it still amazes, I think, most of us too. The community is unbelievable, and like you'd expect, there's certainly folks who step up and go above and beyond, and so there's a good mix of the types of volunteers. Some people are comfortable coming in and just maintaining a piece of equipment. Some people are comfortable coming in and helping build walls if we're expanding or we're doing a strategic project. And then some people are on the member council where they show up every Tuesday and we go through all the stuff that has to be done, making sure we have consumables and people are giving tours and all the rest of it. But yeah, everything we do, it's very worthy of saying. We have no salaries, no director salaries, no executive directors, none of that. Everything that happens in our community, managing what is now about to be 15,000 square feet of innovation space, is all done straight up volunteer.
And how did you rally those volunteers? I'm very
Well,
curious.
yeah, well, you know what? I think that's that's really part of the the genius of Mike's early vision with Carrie and Dave on the AscentWorks space was, we'll build this as a community space. The members who join will themselves be part of the thing, right? Mm-hmm. So there's it's like, well, we need a door right here. Well, then put a door right there, right? So we have a membership due every month, and we actually, if you put in 8 hours of volunteering a month, which is like 2 hours a week, we actually discount your membership by about 30%, okay, as a way of sort of paying it forward, and it also gives a little bit of a motivation for people to help. But I mean, honestly, there's people who are putting in, 80 hours a week right now for real.
Yeah.
Because we're in the middle of our phase 4 strategic renovations and that. So it's very, very cool. And that sense of ownership is really something to see, because the whole community just takes so much pride in everything that happens and the way that it happens, because they themselves did it. I know I love giving tours because I always point at the wall that's crooked and go, you know why that's crooked? Because I built that wall.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations on that. That's just amazing that the community is so a part of the creation too. It's not just, one person leading, but it's so many people leading.
Yeah.
So I could talk to you literally for hours. So I'm going to have to wrap this up. And before we wrap it up, what advice would you give, I guess, to existing startup communities that are perhaps newer than you guys are? Any lessons that you would share or do differently? Because I know that at this point, if they were to try to duplicate just by listening to this audio, everything that you've done, they might be slightly overwhelmed.
Right.
So
Totally.
where would they kind of start in the sense of anything that you feel like, oh, I wish I'd done that differently, or this would be great advice?
Yeah. Well, listen, what a perfect segue to a couple plugs. So
Plug away.
we are, having done this, we've learned a lot of things the hard way. And not everything that we've done here isn't going to work everywhere. Like, we get that. But we're doing two things to try and help any other community who wants to get off the ground, or a community that's maybe, looking for best practices from somewhere else. So, number one, we are currently filming a documentary called Innovation Alley, which we got private sector support to do. And we picked a young entrepreneur here in Winnipeg, a young production company, to do it for us. So we have a documentary that'll be out sometime in April or May, Innovation Alley, and it's basically going to tell the story of what we've built here, visually show you what's going on, meet some of the startups and how they're taking advantage of the community, what it means to them, and also the story of, how do we get from A to B. So that we're working on. The other thing that we're doing right now is we have a project going on where we are building both for ourselves and also a generic set, all the documentation we use to run our community, all of the best practices that we have, our governance model, the structure, the business planning, the strategic goal setting, all of that stuff. And the goal of this project will be that we'll have something that, Shauna, let's hop in the time machine 2 years ago, says, hey, I'd like to do that here. Mm-hmm. We can hand you an entire, the Innovation Alley documentary, and here's this business planning guide, and say, here, like, if you do this, you will end up with what we have, and you can make the changes from there, right?
Wow.
So yeah, we're undertaking a whole bunch of effort because we want to share the story, and we, as well as myself, we want this to happen as many places as it can.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to that. I'm very, very excited about that. So how can people connect with you? I know your website is startupwinnipeg.ca. Is that right?
Startupwinnipeg.ca works. Okay. Rampupmanitoba.com works. Yeah. Ascentworks.ca works.
Perfect.
At Rampupmanitoba, at Ascentworks, you'll find us.
Okay, and then what about your Twitter handle? What's your? Okay.
At Rampupmanitoba. Okay. At Ascentworks, and mine is at the Johnson Corp.
The Johnson Corp. Perfect. Yep. So again, this is Shauna Harper, and I just want to thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. And thank you to all the Pivot listeners for listening, and hope you found many tips, as I know I have. And don't forget, you can always download this MP3 version of our podcast later on and listen to it again, because I know that there are probably lots of tips here that you heard and you could hear over and over again. And make sure you subscribe to Pivot this month, because we'll also be featuring some fantastic startup stories from Winnipeg as well as all over Canada.